This is why you should always lock your doors. A junior in high school was home alone working on a paper while his parents were out to dinner. All night, he sits with his back to his door, sitting at his desk with his noise-canceling headphones on. Around 11 o'clock, he takes his headphones off at the same time his parents are returning to the house, and he hears his mom from downstairs yell, "Hey Adrian, what happened?" Confused, he runs downstairs and sees right away what she's looking at, muddy footprints all over the rug. He tells her, "I didn't leave my desk." And then they realize someone must have broken in. They look at the footprints and there's none leaving the house. They're worried someone's still in the house, so they run into the garage, terrified, call the police. Police arrive and they don't find anyone in the house, but they do make a chilling discovery upstairs. The police bring them to the kid's bedroom door, which had been left open all night, and they point to the message written on it in Sharpie. This is the actual transcript of what was written on his door, which means for nearly 2 hours, someone stood in this kid's doorway watching him.
Storytime of how my boyfriend ended up being my stepdad. So I was dating this kid, and me and this kid had like the best relationship. He was 19 and I was 17. And I mean, we were literally always together. And my mom would always call him hot and stuff like that, but you know, I thought that's just what moms do. And I didn't think of it in that type of way. So one day my boyfriend got mad at me. And he was like, "I'm gonna F your mom, become your stepdad, and boss you around if you keep up that attitude." And I mean, who would think that he's gonna actually try to do that? And I said, "I would like to see you try." But again, we were just in a little argument, so about a month or two goes on, and I find messages from my boyfriend to my mom and vice versa. They were like sexting, and I saw things I did not want to see from my mother. So I went to go confront both of them, and I confronted my mom first, and she wouldn't tell me nothing, she just told me to get out of her face. Oh, but my boyfriend told me they have been hooking up. But he told me I was overreacting because it's just my mom. Oh, just wait till you find out what happens next. I'm running out of time for part 2. Part 2 on how my boyfriend became my stepdad. So continuing on with the story, I told him that he was disgusting, and then I just ended our relationship. And at first he wouldn't let me break up with him, but then finally we were just both okay, this is not gonna work out. So about 2 days later, I come home and I see him at my house, and I'm like, "Dude, we're not getting back together, so don't try, you're weird." And he has the audacity to go, "I'm not here for you, I'm here for your mother." And at that point I was like, I'm moving out. And that night I heard some noises that I didn't want to hear. And then my mom ended up getting pregnant again. She's only 34, I think, but he's 19. So the age gap isn't really that big of a difference. But it's the point that my boyfriend decided to F my mom, get her pregnant, and now I don't even know how I'm related to this child. Yeah, so now my mom's pregnant with my ex-boyfriend's child. I mean, I'm so nice to the kid because it's my step-sibling's dad. But at the same time, I secretly want to, inject him out of the game. In the game, I want to inject him out of his life, so, yeah.
Storytime about how I found out my dad was hooking up with other men on Craigslist. To provide a little bit of backstory, when my sister was 16, she came out as bisexual. My dad, being homophobic and conservative, kicked her out. So this set a tone for when I was born. I was raised to be anything but gay. If something looked, smelled, or seemed straight, he forced it on me. ATVs, monster trucks, whatever. My mom, on the other hand, was a lot more kind-hearted. She let me use her makeup and nail products, and essentially anything that I was interested in, such as gaming and fashion. Because of arguments and my dad cheating, my parents decided to get a divorce. But they did have joint custody. When I would go to my dad's, it seemed like his homophobia was getting worse. He would blast adult entertainment on the TV and bring home girls from his little biker gang. One day I accidentally left the AC on and it flooded the apartment. This led to a massive argument between my dad and I. We started arguing about everything, including the girls that he was bringing home. I stated that I didn't like girls in that way, and that's when everything clicked for him about my sexuality. Then he kicked me out. I was homeless until my mom was able to come get me. Years later, I got a voice message from my sister saying Dad's gay. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Insta. Storytime about how I found out my dad was hooking up with other men on Craigslist. I absolutely did not believe my sister whenever she said that dad was gay. I was like, absolutely, there's no way. What's the proof? And I guess my dad had given his grandson, my nephew, his old laptop. On this laptop, he still had his ads up that basically said, "Come leave money on the seat for services." And it had a picture of his white truck. I was still in denial for the longest time because of how homophobic my dad was. But we decided to watch the Craigslist account for a bit. And during a time that we knew that he was dropping off our grandma in Florida, he posted on Craigslist using that exact rental car that he was using. Even though I was pretty much convinced at this point, it was later verified by a family friend who had seen him at a brothel that this was in fact true. He also was a locksmith for a living and used this job title in the email associated with the account. So for that upcoming Christmas, we compiled all the evidence together, put it all into a stocking, and set it out for family Christmas. Follow the guy who sent me this story, and if you have a story that you'd like to share, DM me and follow me on Instagram.
Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. When I was 13 years old, I was stalked severely to the point where it became a federal case. Me and my best friend at the time thought it would be a great idea to walk to the beach. Everything seemed normal until we got home. My friend started getting phone calls on her phone from somebody pretending to be Scream. She hung up and she didn't entertain it. And that's when my phone started getting text messages, and it was really creepy. Back then you could have signatures on your phone, and his signature was always watching. So jokingly I said, since you're always watching, what are we wearing? And he said exactly what we were wearing down to our sock color. Keep in mind that we had just gotten back from the beach and we had already showered and changed clothes. We called the police and they looked around and they couldn't find anything. And that's where things got crazy. Like for part 2, this was 5 years of stalking. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. Part 2. After the police left, the man kept threatening to kill my friend's grandma if we called the police again, saying that he wanted me to come outside and play hide and seek with him. The messages didn't stop. I blocked number after number, but as quickly as I would block one, a new one would just pop up. And I was too scared to turn my phone off because it was clear that he was watching us and the police weren't taking it seriously. I didn't want to agitate him further. I begged for my parents to come and get me. They read the messages, which were very, very disturbing and very explicit and very detailed. They called the police. The police said it was just a boy playing a sick prank. My parents decided to turn my phone off for the day, and very shortly after, my house phone started getting phone calls, so they turned that off, and then my mom's cell phone as well. A few months went on with messages and threats. We changed our number many times, and then one night I was sleeping and I woke up to someone staring at me from my bedroom window with their hand on the door. I screamed, ran to my parents. My dad ran around the house, called the police again. They made another report, and I didn't hear from my stalker for about 8 months. It wasn't until I got my first boyfriend that I heard from my stalker again, like for part 3. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. It had been 8 months and I hadn't heard anything. I was living my best life and I had a boyfriend, my very first. I went over to his house to meet his parents, and on that night I got a text message that said if I didn't leave things would get bad, with the signature always watching. They had a cat that they let roam around outside. Later in the afternoon it was time for my boyfriend's mom to take me home. As we were leaving, when we opened the door, his cat was on the front porch, gutted, with a note that said, "Always watching," written in something red and sticky. Immediately, we called the police. A report was made. My phone was finally taken into evidence, and the note was taken into evidence. They obviously let us keep the cat to bury it. And nothing was done. A few months later, I got my phone back, and they said that the numbers were fake, and somebody was using a computer to change their location, and that there was nothing that they could do. In part 4, things will be very graphic and very violent, so I might take a while to do it, so please be patient with me. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic content. After the cat being gutted, the harassment continued nonstop, telling me that I was his and I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend, and next time things would be much worse. My parents got fed up and they cut off my service, and I ended up moving 40 minutes away and living with another family member, new school district, new everything. My life was normal for about 9 months. Then one day I was walking to the park with my niece and I noticed a man in broad daylight wearing a hoodie, and it was pulled so far down it was covering his entire face, so I was immediately suspicious. I started cutting through trees in a field to see if the man would follow, and he did. I told my niece we were going to play a game and race to the park so I wouldn't alarm her. I picked her up and started running as fast as I could to the nearest house, and I took out my phone even though it was dead and pretended to make a phone call. When I looked back behind us, he was gone. When I made it to the nearest house, they called the police, and the police basically laughed at me and said that type of thing doesn't happen here despite my past. 2 weeks later, I continued my normal routine when I noticed after studying that my key was gone off of my backpack when I made it home. And that is how it all started. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. At first I just thought I didn't clip my key on properly onto my lanyard and maybe it just fell off and it was random. I retraced my steps and I couldn't find it. 2 days later, it was a gross, cold, rainy day, and I always walked home from school. When I got home right away, I noticed it was really cold in the house. I walked downstairs, stripped my clothes off I had on, and put them in the washer, put shorts and a tank top on. My sister always called, so when the phone rang, I answered without even checking. When I answered, no one said anything, it was just breathing. I realized everything in what felt like a second in slow motion. The windows were all open in my room, and the room leading to mine, the screens were all off, the floorboard above me was creaking, and the phone said, "House phone." I dropped the phone in the back and the battery collapsed out. I ran upstairs, and I saw him just at the top of the stairs running towards me. I managed to somehow make it out the front door just before he could grab me, and I was screaming, flailing my arms around in the rain in short shorts and a tank top with no shoes in freezing weather. I ran to my neighbor's. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking. I ran to my friend's house who lived across the street, and her cousin ran through my townhouse. My friend called the police, and the police came and took statements that said there was no sign of forced entry. They didn't take me seriously until my neighbor gave her a statement and said she seen a very large man jump off the balcony and run into the cornfield. My aunt finally made some calls, and my case was taken on by special agents due to how advanced it was and how little evidence there was. About 2 weeks into investigating my case, I was told how it is suspected that he found me. He saw me and my friend that day at the beach, and while we weren't paying attention, he took our entire contact list and emails from our phones in our bag. He called my friend's phone first and most likely was watching from my friend's open window, and he had already decided who his victim was. They believed his obsession with me had something to do with his past and that he had done this type of thing before. It is also suspected during the periods of time he didn't contact me, he could have been in jail or serving in the military. He was able to find me by hacking my email and my Facebook. 3 years went by and I didn't hear anything. Trigger warning, this video contains stalking, part 7. 3 years passed, my life was normal, new state, new name. I took a plane to go visit family and friends in another state. When I arrived, I couldn't get in contact with my boyfriend, so I just thought it was my service. Meanwhile, without my knowledge, my boyfriend was getting pictures and threats of someone saying they were following me with pictures of them on a plane and the signature always watching. I was pretty jet-lagged, so I went outside for a walk, and out of nowhere, I was bear-hugged from behind and my arms were pinned against my side. I screamed and kicked and did anything I could, and something stabbed me in the leg, and I was immediately dropped to the ground. I took off running as fast as I could and pulled out my phone and called the police. The police looked around, but since this happened in another state and I was only visiting, nothing was really looked into after the day it happened. I had to have 6 stitches. He wore a mask, he used a computer to change his location and create fake numbers. I wonder every day if today will be the day he comes back. That's something I might have to live my entire life with, always looking behind my shoulder, but maybe my story can save someone else. Always trust your instincts.